Hey, folks, Michael Taylor here, your host of Theater Corner Green Room. Looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulty on the live stream, but we're going to push this thing anyway. All right, so today we have our incredible host, our incredible guest, American-based opera singer, DeAndre Simmons. Welcome to the show, brother.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Very good indeed. And of course, we have our co-host, the actress, Kathryn Smith-McGlynn.
Hey, hey.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so this is our inaugural interview. Andre is a very special guest, and what better way to kick this this podcast, video podcast, off than with DeAndre. All right, so DeAndre, why don't we just jump into this? How in the heck does a young brother from San Diego, California, ends up performing in front of presidents, in front of internationally, several presidents, President Obama? What does that journey look like?
Well, I'm certainly grateful for every experience that I've had. When I grew up in San Diego at the time, we had arts in the schools, which is not booming as it once was, right? And we had opera singers and dancers and instrumentalists, etc., that all came to our schools and gave presentations. I happened to go to a performing arts school, but nevertheless, it was everywhere. And we were also taken to see live shows, the whole show, whether it was a musical, an opera, a ballet, the symphony, etc. We were exposed to it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, I didn't know anything else in terms of whether it existed or not, or it wasn't something that was over there, so to speak, right? I was a part of it, and I just happened to like it. And I remember very clearly saying to my grandmother who raised me, I said, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And next thing I know, she had me auditioning for things. I don't know how she found out about where one auditions and those kinds of things. But nonetheless, that's what started it. And I was 6 when that happened. And from then on, I'm very happy that it wasn't a struggle necessarily. Things sort of happened constantly and regularly.
I always wonder, what would you say to someone? You know, some people find theater like a little intimidating. You know, and you're performing in different languages. What would you say to someone who's on the fence about going to an opera performance that they wouldn't understand, and you know, in the space seems elitist and all that? What would you say to someone?
My maternal grandmother, who spoke English, but did not speak Spanish whatsoever, but she watched Spanish soap operas, and I would often ask her, "Why do you watch? You don't speak Spanish at all. Why are you watching that?" And she could tell you exactly what was happening, all of their names, and followed along as though they were speaking English. So there's no difference in going to the opera. The stories are still common. Someone's in love with someone else, but they can't be in love with them because of family, of religion, of whatever the circumstances are, power, money, the whole 9 yards. The stories are the same. And once you sit back and just listen to the extraordinary music that comes along with classical music and let that wash over you, you will engage with the story, because you will then be able to see what the relationships are. And that's all any story is about, is the relationships, right? So whether it's in French or German or Italian, etc., no matter what, you connect with the characters through the story. And very often that is relatable through the music.
I have a question. Now, you started with musical theater, right?
Yes.
young. And how does that work, that transition between musical theater and opera?
You know, musical theater, well, one, my voice didn't mature until I was older, right?
You didn't start out as a bass?
I didn't start out as a bass. And much to my chagrin, right? But nonetheless, so there were so many opportunities to be on stage. And as Denzel Washington said, you know, that's where you learn your craft. You know, I'm not in movies yet, but I was able to learn things on the musical theater stage that certainly helped me on the operatic stage and continue to help me on the operatic stage. So the way it sort of happened was I loved opera from the first times that I heard singers come to the school to give presentations, or the first operas that I went to. And I'm still so excited to be able to say that many of my colleagues and or mentors that are currently my mentors were singing lead roles with the San Diego Opera at the time, James Morris, Renee Fleming, etc., that I was able to see do their thing before I knew who they were, but certainly that influenced me greatly. So the swing into classical music really started happening when I was around 15, and my voice changed. And the wonderful voice teacher that I had at the time, Eileen Moss, started introducing me to the songs of Schubert and Schumann and Strauss, etc., that really started to create and build a technique, a vocal technique. And then as my voice changed and matured, I moved on to arias, and then of course went to conservatory. So it really was a very fluid transition. There did come a time when I sort of had to put musical theater to the side because, one, I was working in the classical realm as much as I was. So, but over the last few years, I'm very happy to have been able to put musical theater sort of back into the routine because, one, I love it. Two, I will always accept a paycheck, and three, it's just another avenue by which I can express that which is in me.
Nice. And I read that you called opera sometimes a jealous mistress.
Yes, I mean, absolutely, right? The number of hours you have to put alone in the practice room, sitting in the chair, going over the words, memorizing the words, which is no different from the actor on the musical theater stage or in straight play, etc. But nonetheless, you also have the other element of music that is not that doesn't stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a musical, you have dialogue, you have a monologue, and then you have a song, and then you have an ensemble. But in opera, the downbeat happens, and you don't stop musically until the very end. So the connection between the words, the characters, the music, and whatever it is the composer wanted to express takes a good amount of time to really not only hone it, but also to get it right so that when you get to the rehearsal room, you're ready to go. I mean, easily to learn an opera could take up to 5 or 6 months before you're able to go into the rehearsal room and do it, because unlike musical theater or doing a play, we are contracted to show up off book as opposed to showing up and being handed a script, right? Which is quite different, and I'm still grappling with, but I'm a procrastinator, so it's helpful.
I tell you, I love the opera stuff, but I got to tell you, there's one particular performance that I absolutely am in love with. You performed at the California Center for the Arts, Ain't Misbehaving.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have that clip, if you don't mind. I'd like to play part of it. Here we go. And you did steal the show, by the way.
I'll take it.
Here we are.
What's that running round in here? Oh, mercy. Up in Harlem, at a table for two. Well, there was the four of us, baby, me, your big feet, and you. From your ankles up, I say, you sure is sweet. But from there down, baby, you just too much feet. Oh, your feet's too big. Don't want you 'cause your feet's too big. Mad at you 'cause your feet's too big. I really hate you 'cause your feet's too big. Where'd you get 'em? Your girl, she likes you. Says she thinks you're nice. Says you got what it takes to take her to paradise. Well, she likes your face. She loves your rig. But look at her. Look at her. Your feet's too big. Oh, your feet's too big. Don't want you 'cause your feet's too big. Mad at you 'cause your feet's too big. I really hate you 'cause your feet's too big. Your pedal extremities are colossal. To me, they look just like a fossil. You got me walking, talking, and squatting.
Very nice. Very nice. I freaking love it. Tell me about the experience on that show.
Well, it really was one of those things that happens because God, the universe, means for it to happen. That was, in fact, the first musical I had done that was not attached to an opera house or a symphony in many years. But I'd already seen the show, the broadcast on KPBS many years prior, and I had always loved the music and the show, and of course those great performers who, with the exception of Charlene Woodard and Andre de Shields, the others have gone on, including most recently the wonderful artist Ken Page, who in fact directed us in this musical. I wanted to do it, and sort of it had come to my mind again that, you know, that's a show that I'd like to do, and suddenly I saw an audition notice. So I auditioned for what is now CCA Theatricals, an extraordinary company here in Escondido, with marvelous people running the show. And so I auditioned, Ken Page sitting in the room, and I started singing part what we were asked to prepare, and he said, "You better sing, boy." and there are about 4 or 5 other guys up for the same role. And one young man went in and he sang the part we were asked to sing, and it goes to a particular high note, and he kept singing. Now we're outside of the room, right? But we can hear him, and he sang it, and then he sang it again, and he sang it again. And maybe about 6 or 7 times he sang this passage. And I turned to whoever was next to me and said, "Listen, it ain't that deep. I don't need this role if I got to do that." But the next morning at 10 a.m., I got a phone call saying, "We'd love for you to do this role," in which I immediately accepted. And so walking into rehearsal with Ken Page, who is, of course, an extraordinary artist, who was the first, obviously, to do this because he was part of the small group of artists that created this show. But he was also the original Old Deuteronomy in the musical Cats. He was also he's also the Oogie Boogie Man, right, in The Nightmare Before Christmas. He was the original father in Children of Eden. I mean, he really made an enormous mark on the Broadway scene, and I'm still sort of frustrated that the lights of Broadway have not been dimmed for him as they have for others, particularly some that have maybe been in the career a little less than he has, not to take away from what their mark was and is. Nonetheless, I have to say that Ken and I didn't necessarily get on well in the beginning of those rehearsals. He, of course, wanted my work to be a certain way, right? And it sort of took away the ability of an actor, of a performer, to put their own patina of what they think something should be. And, you know, it took a while for me to realize, wait a minute, the name of the character is Ken, right? I am essentially playing him, right? And he and Nell Carter and Andre de Shields and Charlene Woodard and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the other wonderful singer's name who was a part of it, sat down and handpicked these songs for this collective, right? And also I, as a Mason, am very proud and happy that Fats Waller himself was also a Mason, which I learned later, but still a wonderful thing. So once I sort of came to grips with the fact that Ken Page was not keeping me back from being the artist I wanted to be or expressing what I wanted to express, but more so he was giving to us what is the legacy of this show. He was giving to us what would be the last time he would direct this show.
Wow.
And we, those of us that did this production, are now the keepsakes of the greatness of not only the show, of the production, the original production, and of those that were the originals that have gone on. So while we didn't get on well in the beginning, we became good friends. I certainly would love to be able to say, and I was able to call on him about other projects and seek advice, which he gave readily, and I'm happy to say that even up until a week before he passed, we were in touch. So it really turned out to be an extraordinary experience that I will continue to cherish.
And how do you, I'm very interested in the creative process of different artists, and how do you reconcile that with your process as an artist, and then a director coming in saying, no, this is the way you're going to do it,
right?
Not necessarily giving you line reads or note reads, but really kind of your take,
yes,
on what a character should be, and putting your own stamp on it.
I learned to sort of go about everything in the way that I would do anything, right? Learning the lines and asking whatever questions needed to be asked for myself, for the character, and all those kinds of things. And then while keeping it in your head, I find the easiest thing to do to keep peace is to do what they ask. And I find that we are living in such a time that there is a sort of hypersensitivity, and young performers don't seem to feel that they are able to speak up and able to say, I'm happy to try this the way you're asking, but I really can't sing it that way. It really goes against whatever I am as a performer in some form or fashion to say these words this way. Can we come to a medium? Can we compromise some way so that you get some of what you want and I get some of what I need to do this, so that the outcome is such that everyone is happy, and hopefully it will be a tremendous performance. So I have learned that if you have the conversation in a way that, let's be honest, feeds their ego. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, everyone at the end of the day, everyone just wants to be heard, right?
Right.
And wants to feel seen and respected, and all of those things. And so to be able to create the language of a conversation in such a way that the result is universally equal, right? So the director gets what they believe they want, the performer gets what they believe they want, and hopefully the end result is something extraordinary.
It's very diplomatic. And you mentioned Mason, and I was today years old when I knew what a Mason was. I heard of the Masonic Temple and everything. I was like, what is this Mason thing? That's very intriguing. So it's a fraternity of brothers, right?
It's a fraternity of brothers, the oldest fraternity in the world.
Does that inform your performance or how you go about it?
I would say that my career informs things within my Masonic journey, because we too have things we have to memorize, rituals and essentially small plays and things like that. So my career certainly informs my ability to do that kind of thing.
Okay.
My becoming a Mason is born out of my grandfather. My paternal grandfather was a Mason, and even was the Grand Secretary for the Grand Lodge of New Jersey. And so growing up, I was able to see him practicing Masonry. And, you know, I'd go visit him for, you know, a couple of weeks in the summer or something like that. And obviously he still was working, just because it was my summer vacation, right? So he'd come home after work at about 5 o'clock. He'd have some dinner. He'd put on a suit, and then he'd leave the house again. And say, well, you know, why did I come 3,000 miles for you to never be in the house? But he would take myself and one of my older cousins to, parades and events, Masonic events all over the place. He was a driver. So he would drive us from New Jersey to Chicago. He would drive us to Florida. He would drive us to Atlanta for Masonic events. So I always saw it growing up. And then as I got older, to understand that extraordinary people in the performing arts were also Masons. One of the most famous is certainly Mozart, Fats Waller, as I mentioned. The list really does sort of go on. And to read about them and their careers and their journey through Masonry was only more inspiring. So there came a time when I said, I think this is what I want. And so I pursued it. And I'm very happy to say that I'm 6 years deep in this wonderful fraternity.
That is beautiful. I have another piece that I want to share, Boatman, but that's not the exact name. You're going to have to.
That's right. The character is the Boatman.
Right.
And the show is Sunday in the Park with George, which is by my favorite musical theater composer, the wonderful Stephen Sondheim. And while Sweeney Todd is my favorite musical, Sunday in the Park with George is certainly one of the greatest shows, I think, in existence.
All right, so we're gonna play part of that.
You call that recreation?
Almost finished.
Get away from that dog!
That was hardly necessary.
How do you know what's necessary? Who are you? With your expensive pad and crayons. You call that work? Smug, goddamn holier than thou, shitty little men with your fancy clothes, born with pens and pencils, not pricks. you don't know.
Bravo, brother. There's a lot happening there. Maybe you can give us some context or tell us about the role in the play, maybe.
Well, Sunday in the Park with George is based on the extraordinary painting by George Seurat. And the whole purpose, it was his doing that. His entire painting was made with dots, and he only used primary colors. So it was the mixing of colors of these dots, putting one color next to another, that created when you step back a different color, whether it was red or green or pink. And the closer you get to the painting, the more finer you see these dots. But the further away from it, the more you see the just sort of the greatness of this painting. So you see individual people. You see the lake, which was the Isle of Le Grand Jatte in France. And so it's the Sunday afternoon on the Isle of Le Grand Jatte. And so the musical takes each person in this painting and creates a story. So it is based on George Seurat, loosely based on the life of George Seurat and his relationship with Dot in the show, and relationships to other people that are in the painting. And when you see the painting, the boatman is laying in the downside left corner. You have what is supposed to be his love, Dot, and you see her in several different places. So in the second act, you have the young George, who is the great-grandson of George Seurat, and he has his own art form. But his grandmother, who is still alive, says, look at this painting. You see there? That's your great-grandmother. That's your great-grandmother. That's your great-grandmother, because he loved her so much. And when I'm gone, this will be all that you have. This will be your family tree. In Sunday, the ensemble, Sunday by the Blue, Purple, Yellow, Red Water, is just the opening chords. I have yet not to cry at the opening of that song, because it's so extraordinary. And that production was another one with CCAE Theatricals, which again is just one of my favorite places to work.
And so I have this image here. This is the part that of performances people don't see. When you're and you've been in some very elaborate costumes. So what is it about this part? I mean, what was the most integral and complex costume that you've had to don for an operatic performance?
Let's see. I did a production of Macbeth in Germany, where we all were in latex, black latex costume, right, from head to toe. That was different. that was different. I did lose weight doing it, so I guess I'll give it some credit. But most often, I shouldn't say most often, but when it happens that the production is somewhat traditional, I don't care who you are. I think everybody likes in some way to play dress up, right? Putting on a very fine suit, putting on a very nice dress, shoes, and the whole 9 yards. And sometimes I have to put on a wig. The whole 9 yards. It's fun, and it's great to play make-believe, right? The child in you never leaves in that way. And so it's always nice to have a costume fitting and you also find your character through some of that as well, right? I can be the Bonds in Madama Butterfly, or someone can be Queen Elizabeth in one of the Queen plays of Donizetti, and you have your own opinion, you have the way you're doing it and the way you sing the lines, and then you put on that costume, and there's another level that just sort of boosts you up.
The way you move,
way you move, especially, Elizabethan times, and you have those collars or some enormous gown or robe. It indicates everything you do on stage, and thereby emphasizing your character and how you ebb and flow.
I'm looking at, now this is from Madame Butterfly.
Yes.
On this one, how is it with operas? You tend to have pretty large ensembles. And how is it working with so many different performers on stage and such a huge production, where I'm sure they're very expensive to mount these pretty large operatic productions. And how do you navigate that part of it, being an integral part of such a large ensemble?
We are most times very blessed to have great stage managers and assistant stage managers that tell us when to go. We sit in our dressing room until you hear Mr. Simmons to the stage, and then to have a good director who also has to be a really wonderful traffic cop, right? Who has to be able to navigate 80 people in the chorus, 20 people, principals, and coming on and off the stage at the same time, and on this specific music cue, and arriving at this music cue at this point. So yes, it's wonderful when you have someone that can also say, hey, let's talk about the relationship you have between, in this case, the Bonds and Butterfly, who he is her uncle, and she has renounced her religion in order to marry an American. And so he comes on the scene to say, listen, I didn't have anything to say when you decided to marry this white man, right? I didn't have anything to say then. But when I went down to the temple and found out you renounced our religion, we can't have anything to do with you, right? So he says to everybody else, hey, let's go. She's renounced us all and our ancestors, so we got to go. But nonetheless, to have a director who can manage that conversation as well as bringing everyone in and out is rare, and also wonderful. So we most times don't have to worry about that kind of thing, because the other people, sort of driving the ship, really do most times a very good job at it.
Well, okay, I'm going to get a little political. Can I get political?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in theater, I'm sure you've heard of We See You, White American Theater, whole movement that happened since 2020. And since then, the theater landscape, in terms of programming, in terms of inclusivity, both on stage and off stage, and the administrative offices, a call for greater representation. Has that also been a call in the opera world?
Absolutely. It's it doesn't stop, right? And it certainly it is, while it is better, it is certainly no utopia. And I often get asked, oh, well, there's not a lot of Black people in opera, right? So how do you fare being, one of very few Black people in opera? And I say, well, I don't know. Let me call my colleague Morris Robinson, or let me call my colleague LaTonya Morris, or Moore, or let me call Janae Bridges. There are many.
Kathleen Battle,
Kathleen Battle, right? I mean, the list goes on and on. And in fact, I think this month in 1966 was Leontine Price's debut with the Metropolitan Opera. And on the 7th in 1955 was Marian Anderson's debut at the Met in the role of Eureka, becoming the first Black artist to perform a principal role at the Metropolitan Opera. Fascinating story. It was supposed to be Robert McFerrin, who is the father of
Bobby
McFerrin. Was the father. And and he was a fantastic opera singer, and he was slated to go on in an opera, but politics said, Marian Anderson is Marian Anderson, and at that time she was beyond her prime vocally, but nonetheless it was a political move to have her be the first, and then followed by Leontine Price. Anyway, back to the topic. While I have never had someone say to my face, "We're not hiring you because," I would be naive to think that conversation doesn't happen, right? And while I'm fortunate to have received the roles and opportunities that I have, I also know very well that when I am not in the room, the discussion changes. No matter how wonderful someone may say that I am and how much they want me to be back and those kinds of things, the discussion is different, right? And that discussion is always had in a way that, of course, allows someone to not think that what they are saying is essentially racism.
Mm-hmm.
That what they are saying is demeaning and in ways immoral.
Mm-hmm.
And then, sometimes you have people that tell you, well, I was in that meeting and they said X, Y, and Z. So they're going to give you this role and not that role because they want you to work here, but they don't want say, oh, okay, great, wonderful. And the thing I have learned to say and believe very firmly is I don't care what someone says in the room or behind my back or wherever they may be. My question is to the person telling me, who says they're my friend, why are they so comfortable saying it in front of you?
Oh, my.
Mm.
Oh, jeez.
Okay.
Well, I thought I'd tell you. Yes, but why were they able to say it to you?
Yes.
Come on now.
And so in this business, one has to, as Leontine Price would say, burn the midnight oil. You put your head down, you do your work to the best of your ability, and you keep going forward.
Yeah.
And those things that are for you will come, and those things that are not won't.
And it's having that unwavering belief in yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. There's any number of people that say, well, your ego or something, say, if someone says to me, oh, well, how was your performance? I was fantastic.
Yeah.
I know full well if I've gone out on that stage and done everything that I can do that particular day to sound good, to be good, to put on a performance that I think is good, and when I'm not.
Yeah.
Right. And anyone that sort of says, oh, well, I guess we were also wonderful. That's all well and good. Colleagues can be great. That's all great. That's wonderful. But you also have to, if one of my mentors said something to me and was sort of a model for herself and her career that always stuck with me. And she said, I'm not as much interested in the person that says, I'd like to have this career. I'm much more interested in the person that says, I am going to have this career.
Yeah. Gotta have it.
You have to have it. There's too many pitfalls. There's too much loneliness in this business. There are too many things that say, if there's another option for you, take it.
I've been told that.
So if you don't have that thing in you that says, I don't care about that. This is what I am going to do, and I'm going to be great at it. I don't know how one succeeds.
And I think that's, with artists, that can be something that other folks may misinterpret, right? They feel it's arrogance.
Right.
Or they're so full of themselves. And no, you have to, it's kind of that skin, and there's nothing wrong with being confident in your abilities.
Absolutely not.
And I think the challenge is with youth and kids coming up, it's teaching them knowing that self-worth, right?
Absolutely.
And differentiating that from just pure arrogance, which is a totally different beast.
Yes, 100%. And to that person that sort of says, well, I asked him how his show was, and he said he was fantastic. Oh, gosh, you talk about immodesty. Excuse me. Why should I dim my light because yours is not bright enough to sustain you?
Right. Uh-oh.
Okay.
Come on.
And, as Oprah Winfrey said one time, and this is something I have certainly adopted, when I go on stage, anytime I go on stage or into a room where I have to speak or whatever it is, I'm not just going as myself. I am going with my wonderful grandmother who passed. I am going with my grandfather. I am going with my aunts and uncles and cousins who raised me and breathed life into me in some way, who were a part of me becoming who I am, of every mentor I've had, of every ancestor that I still have. I go in physically as one, but I come as 10,000. And I mean, that's an extraordinary old adage, right? But the reality is, why should I dim my light because someone else has trouble seeing it?
I love that. Absolutely.
Sweeney Todd.
Yes, Sweeney Todd. I saw you in Sweeney Todd. And let me tell you, the creative artistry was beyond, right? I have such a hard time trying to reconcile. You had me both. I was loving him, and then I was like, but he's, oh my gosh, he's like cutting people up. How did you meld that together in one person?
One has to remember that Sweeney Todd comes on the scene not interested in what happens, right? In what eventually comes about. Sweeney Todd comes on the scene wanting revenge for two people, right? And it is, people say, well, he's so evil and things like that. No, the real evil person is Mrs. Lovett, who convinces him to do this thing for personal gain, for financial gain, right? And so here's a man who, or person, right, who lost everything. He lost his wife and his daughter at the hands of two horrible people, the judge and the beadle, and was shipped off to a prison, right, for 15 years to come back to find, or so he's been told by Mrs. Lovett, that his wife is dead. And after they raped and abused and beat her and everything like that, put her out on the street, she went crazy and poisoned herself, so she's dead. And his daughter, who is now 16, right, because when he left she was a year old, is under the watch of this judge, right? So his goal is to, one, seek revenge, and two, to reunite with his daughter so that he can have, again, some semblance of that family that he once had. So it really is a story about redemption, about love and family, and in its own twisted way, right?
Mhm.
For him. And yes, he falls into this manipulation with Mrs. Lovett, but his vision is always the same. He doesn't care about the pie shop succeeding and making money and all those kind of things. His focus is, this is what I must do to avenge my family. And I'm sure that had he done that in the beginning, it wouldn't have continued. It wouldn't have continued in that way. But at the very end, you see when he realizes what he has done, that he has killed his wife.
Yeah. Wow, that was so heartbreaking.
That you see the pain and anger that has been in him the entire time, you know, and then you also see in this moment the lying and manipulation and evilness that comes out of Mrs. Lovett, who even in this moment is saying, no, I didn't lie that she was dead. Well, you heard what you wanted to hear, but I'm still here. You can love me, and we can be happy. And so the dichotomy of this sort of murderous villain, so to speak, and this real loving husband and father, sort of is already grafted in itself by nature of the extraordinary music of Stephen Sondheim, the wonderful lyrics, and the book by Mr. Wheeler. It's almost as if, as long as you keep your mind and your heart open to the idea that evil is not always evil. What's on the surface is not always what is true, right? Most times it's not. And until you get underneath that and find the real core of it all, it made it far easier to express this human being than had he been, you know, really just a surface character.
And is there a nomination here? What is this?
I think we're supposed to be congratulating him, right?
I think so. I'm like, what is that?
You know, as you know, I grew up in San Diego, and there was, you could not, I mean, I guess the horrible phrase is, you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a theater at that time, right? We had Starlight Theater.
Oh,
we
yeah.
had the Lyceum. We had, I mean, just anywhere you could go, there was a great theater doing great work. And so I was able to see so many of the people that I now continue to love and adore. The extraordinary Lee Scarrett, who is just a powerhouse performer. And I'm so privileged to have been able to be directed by her in a recent production of Little Women that I just finished. And I had only known her as a performer and was able to be in a couple of shows with her as a performer, but the dynamic of being with her as a director was really game-changing for me, and incited some real changes of thoughts and opinions that I had of myself as a performer and being on stage, on the performing stage. People like Deanne Johnston, who's an extraordinary director and choreographer, Bill Doyle, and the list really is quite large of wonderful artists that were around and that I looked up to. And to now be in a position where I'm able to be on stage with them or be directed by them is tremendous. All that to say, my performance in Sweeney Todd has been nominated for a Craig Noel Award, which is sort of a local award given through the San Diego Theater Critics Association. And I'm honored to be nominated, right? And to be in amongst so many people that I was able to look up to and learn from and grow from, who have won and who have been nominated, to be amongst that sort of roll call is really quite gratifying, and I'm truly grateful. I'm also grateful that this role, the role of Sweeney, which my favorite musical composer, and one that I certainly hope to do many, many times. I am also among an extraordinary few Black artists that have performed the role professionally of Sweeney Todd. And I am just overjoyed to be amongst Brian Stokes Mitchell and Norm Lewis, who have both performed this role, and both of whom I've seen in this great role.
And you've met Sondheim as well.
Yes,
you had sessions with him.
I met him through my longtime mentor, Barbara Cook, and worked with him a handful of times on his repertoire, which was extraordinary, and some other repertoire too. He was not one of those people that, you only can sing my songs. He loved a great many other composers, and so I worked with him on songs by Harold Arlen, Gershwin. It really was tremendous and informative.
As we're pushing up on the hour, let's talk about your upcoming performances.
Sure.
So over the next couple of months, where are people going to be able to see you do your thing?
Locally, I will be again with the San Diego Opera in their production of Salome by Richard Strauss, and then also in La Traviata by Giuseppe Verdi. And then I go to the East Coast to do my first Porgy in Porgy and Bess in Carolina. And I do a condensed version of Così van tutte in Portland. I have a couple of recitals coming up that feature all Black composers. One in Portland, Oregon, and then one will be here in San Diego in, I think, the March 1st or March 2nd. And so that's a deeply personal program, because the first time I saw something like that was by the great artist Florence Quivar when I first moved to the East Coast in Philadelphia. And to have 20 songs that were all Black artists, Black composers. I don't know that I knew that existed, right? And I was 20, so it was tremendous in that way to have such an extraordinary artist like Florence Quivar presenting them. Made me say, I need to know more. So over the last more years, I have been really a student in terms of looking up these most times lost songs of these great composers that we don't hear about as often as we should.
So I'm going to be an ignorant brother for a second.
Don't be that person,
I knew that performance was coming up, but I didn't know how to pronounce it. And I wanted to hear him say how it's pronounced. I mean, he said Salome, but I was thinking salmon or so.
Salami.
So excuse me, brother.
That's all right. That's all right.
But thank you for giving us the correct pronunciation.
Certainly.
All right. So appreciate you coming by and making time for us.
This is my complete pleasure.
And you're gonna have to come back again,
please.
In a few months as you line up other performances.
Happily.
And you are an incredible artist.
Thank you so much.
This has been wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you both.
And we are watching you. And I say we the ancestors too. I'm glad you made that point earlier. That's hugely, hugely important.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
And my co-host, thanks for hanging out. And sorry for the technical. I don't know. AT&T was not kind to us today, but we'll have this full interview posted later on today. And thank you so much for tuning in with our amazing guest, American-based DeAndre Simmons. And we'll see you on the next interview. Thank you so much. Signing off.